Welcome back to the 2020 Macabre Month of Horror. I'm putting out tons of horror content this month here at Brickwall Pictures, so make sure to subscribe so you catch it all. Today's review is for Rabid, an early David Cronenberg film. If you are unfamiliar with David Cronenberg, he's the body horror guy. He's also been dubbed the king of venereal horror. He moved away a bit from the horror genre later on in his career, but for a couple of decades he was consistently delivering gruesome horror fare. If you want to hear my thoughts on other David Cronenberg films, I reviewed both The Brood and Scanners as part of the 2017 Macabre Month of Horror. You can check those out right after this video.
Don't scream. Don't panic. He's dead, and the dead can't hurt the living. Rabid.
Rabid is a film that will likely surprise you multiple times in fun ways if you go into it knowing absolutely nothing. So I'll keep this review spoiler-free for now, so that you can decide if you want to give it a chance and go in blind. I'll get into spoilers in a bit, but I'll give you a warning first. So for now, no spoilers. The setup to Rabid sees a man and woman, Hart and Rose, get into a terrible motorcycle accident on a country road. Rose will surely die without immediate medical attention, and the nearest hospital is over 3 hours away. So she is treated instead at a nearby plastic surgery clinic. This life-saving surgery leaves Rose changed in an inexplicable way. This section of the film is only the first 10 to 15 minutes of the film. And it's also by far the weakest part of the film to me. There's a shift at around the 30-minute mark where the film opens up to a wider scope and takes off in a different direction than what I was expecting. And that is where it became deeply interesting to me. Now that's not to say that the opening of this film is bad. There's still plenty of intrigue and there are some good moments, but the seams of the film show more clearly in the beginning. The first act of the film is also deceptively small in scale, which helps the second and third acts to feel even larger than they really are. The film is rough around the edges, more so than most of David Cronenberg's work. There are a few plot holes, including a couple pretty substantial ones, and there are some awkward, if not outright bad, performances in the mix. The largest overall issue with the film is the characterization of the lead characters. We don't spend any time with our two leads before their motorcycle accident, and even after the accident, we still don't get much in terms of character development, backstory, or even just personality. This motorcycle crash and the ensuing surgery is meant to have drastically changed Rose on all levels, but since we only see her post-crash, we don't have anything to compare her new state of being to. A before and after glimpse at her character would go a long distance in terms of adding depth to her as a person. Rose was played by Marilyn Chambers, who was actually a porn actress and didn't really do a ton of other non-porn acting throughout her career. It's one of her only narrative roles. She does a pretty good job in the role, but there's not a whole lot to work with on a character level. She definitely comes out on top when you compare her to the male lead, though, who is much more of a mixed bag. I wouldn't go so far as to call his entire performance bad, but he didn't really deliver for me in the most important moments. His big dramatic scenes all kind of fell flat. Cronenberg's trademark body horror is already in full bloom here in Rabid. It's not as all-encompassing as in something like The Fly. It's more on the level of something like The Brood, where the body horror is interesting and grotesque, but it's not really the center point of the film. There's one main body horror element, and I really liked the way it was utilized. When the first couple of kills in the movie go down, you're like, what just happened? It just looks like they're hugging and somehow one of them dies. But when the eventual reveal happens, it succeeds in being a surprising and uncomfortable visual that also doesn't get overused. Cronenberg does a great job of ramping up the little glimpses that we get and never lingering for too long on this effect. And now I think it's about time that we jump into spoilers. So if you haven't seen Rabid yet, and you don't want any more of the plot revealed, then this is where the video ends for you. I'm still not going to spoil the whole film. I'm not going to reveal the ending, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about the plot now. So if this is where the video ends for you, make sure you keep checking back for the rest of this year's Macabre Month of Horror. If you go into Rabid without any prior knowledge, then the methods of horror are a bit hard to pin down at first. The subgenre stylings are somewhat nebulous in that regard. What begins as medical transformation horror starts to feel like a slasher film, before becoming a zombie film of sorts, and then finally settling down into a pandemic film. I did not know this was a pandemic film going into it, and Rabid definitely does more with the pandemic angle than most zombie films bother with. Let's just say, like all pandemic films, Rabid hits differently in 2020. As far as zombie films go, Rabid feels like a unique spin on the subgenre to me. I've seen other reviews for Rabid claim that the film is just a cliche zombie movie that doesn't do anything different, and I have to completely disagree with that. The zombies in Rabid don't feel like your typical zombies. They come about in a different way, they operate by different rules, and they function in the plot in a completely different way. By far the most interesting aspects of the film to me were the constantly widening scope and the structure of the viral spread, both of which begin at around the 30-minute mark and continue all the way to the end of the film. The first 30 minutes might be the weakest part of the film, but it is also a pretty brilliant bit of misdirection when you go in blind like I did, because it makes you think the entire film will be taking place within this plastic surgery clinic. It was a very welcome surprise when the film first began widening its scope. I love how slow the infection spreads at first. The film adopts a structure wherein we watch each level of the spread as it happens. Rose infects a farmer and a truck driver, then we stay with those two new characters, and we watch them spread the infection further, and so on. You rarely, if ever, get such a clear chain of consequences in a zombie film, and we hardly ever see a true patient zero where the infection begins either. We get that here in Rose. Now, how in the hell a skin graft leaves Rose with a weird proboscis creature in her armpit that needs blood? That's anyone's guess. I have no fucking clue what's going on there. If there's a logic to it of how that came into being from a skin graft, then I can't figure it out. It goes completely unexplained, and I think it would vary on a person-by-person basis whether or not that level of inexplicable craziness bothers you. With a surrealist tone, it wouldn't feel out of place, but within the broader piece, it definitely raises questions that don't get answered. It's pretty realistic otherwise. I'm sure it wasn't the intended effect, but the parts of Rabid that I enjoyed the most were the parts without the main characters. Following someone infected and trying to hold it together, the furthering spread of the infection, the interviews with the epidemiologist, and the response from the Canadian government, those are the elements that I greatly enjoyed. All these aspects play out in vignette-esque scenes as the film continues to broaden its scope and show the fallout of the typhoid Mary that is Rose. I liked how procedural and matter-of-fact the greater developments were, and I wouldn't have minded if we just lost track of Hart and Rose a little more in the proceedings. I really didn't care for that too much. Rabid is a film that I will definitely be watching again in the future. If you've seen it, then let me know what you thought in the comments. Stick around for the rest of the macabre month of horror, and check out my reviews for The Brood and Scanners if you want more Cronenberg coverage. I haven't reviewed Dead Ringers or The Fly yet, but I would highly recommend both of those Cronenberg films as well. I'll be watching Videodrome for the first time this Halloween night, so I'm looking forward to that. Thanks for watching. Bye.